Welcome to the Daily Space Weather Show. Today we've decided to broadcast from hell because we forgot to press like on our own video yesterday. So make sure you press the like button ASAP, lest those things occur which are not so good. We're showing 24-hour videos of the closest star. Pardon that rotating field effect. I forgot to turn it off. This oversight could not be avoided or remedied. Oh, yeah. So, 2 X-class flares in the past 24 hours and a major CME impact on the way tonight. So if you've got clear skies, you may get a great view of the aurora, and things are clearing up here in Lehigh Valley, so we may find ourselves outside filming some aurora. We could see as much as a KP8, like we said last night, a G4 class magnetic storm. Fingers crossed for that. A major CME has sent it on its way. And, 2 X-class flares in the past 24 hours. By the way, if you don't follow us over on X, a.k.a. Twitter, an actual brand name, you may not see some certain posts, certain analysis, certain shares. So, highly recommend you do so. Yeah, follow us over on X, otherwise known as Twitter, twitter.com/smashomash or x.com/smashomash. There's a 24-hour video at 304 angstroms, and yeah, there are 2 X-class flares in there from sunspot 3663, which is in your upper right. And we're uppity about our right to show you more solar imagery. So there's 94 angstroms. That is just today, May 5th. And happy Cinco de Mayo. We ate some spicy food. If you want to see what we ate, check out the Instagram account. Links below the video to that as well. Lots of additional content available from the channel. Shout out to Smash staff, who's been doing such a fine job with the website that we may have to do a fine job on her face with our fist. Next, some volcanic activity here from places like Sakurajima, Semaru, producing a 15,000-foot ash plume as it explodes. Also Dakono, Ruang, Popocatépetl, Santiaguido in Guatemala, also Fuego. Parache remains at alert level orange in Colombia. Not being downgraded yet, it requires sustained lack of activity. Sangay in Ecuador, new volcanic emissions there. Revenador and Sabancaya producing a 24,000-foot plume of volcanic ash over Peru as it explodes. Earthquake activity has kicked up here. We've had quite a couple of large quakes here, as well as some significant activity around the Pacific Rim. These are the 5 and greater magnitude quakes for the past 24 hours. Peru had a 5.0. Micronesia had a 5.6. New Zealand had a deep 5.3. Tonga had a 5.4. A 5.2 in the Aleutian Islands of Alaska. Papua New Guinea had a 5.2. Quite a bit of stuff going on there. South Sandwich Islands had a 5.4. Papua New Guinea had a 5.4. East Central Pacific Rise had a 5.4. And then a 6.2 strikes Indonesia there. Let's hope that's not a foreshock. That is a tsunami-producing type zone there. 6.2 magnitude quake at Indonesia. Did it do a lot of damage? It doesn't look like it did. It's in a pretty unpopulated zone there. Check it out. In the Karam Sea. The Karam Sea, yes, the ever-popular sailing spot and vacation location for those from Karam. Of course, everybody from Karam goes to the Karam Sea. What, don't you? What, are you crazy? You don't go on vacation to the Karam Sea? Who doesn't go there? Fortunately, you don't really feel earthquakes if you're on a boat. 10.7 centimeter radial flux is at, I don't know. But there's the 1-year graph of it represented by that black line, and it's still at 167. Interesting. It was 167 yesterday, I think, so it has actually leveled off here despite the major uptick in solar flares. As far as sunspot number, we'll get to that in a minute. I think that's pretty much leveled out as well here. So we are expecting additional sunspots to be counted by tomorrow's Daily Space Weather video, so you can expect an increase in sunspot number. Again, major geomagnetic storm coming tonight. We could see as much as a KP8. It all depends on magnetic fields, and we're about to go in geomagnetic storm conditions early here. So the CME is already impacting, and so far it's not looking all that strong, but the magnetic fields can shift rapidly depending on things like a dense core and things like that. So it is a regular thing that we'll see some CMEs, that do vary wildly throughout their impact. So the CME is already here, folks. It's already arriving. We're about to go into geomagnetic storm conditions caused mainly just as a result of the shift in the magnetic fields. So here's NOAA's forecast, NOAA's Enlil spiral there. And pretty much showing up right on time when everybody said it would show up. As we find ourselves getting better and better at forecasting these things. ESA tends to agree as well. And of course, we've been talking about this for days and indeed weeks. Of the past 30 CME impacts, I think we missed 2 or something like that. Like 1 false alarm and 1 unexpected one or something like that. Something like 2 out of 30 were all that were missed in the past few months. If you weren't aware, you haven't been watching the world's most comprehensive daily space weather content. Here are the past 4 hours of Earth's magnetic moment from space. And we should see, I think the uptick here has been recent enough that it'll show up here in the past 4 hours. Let's see what happens. It's depicting magnetohydrodynamic pressure, and there are a lot of variables in the space weather modeling framework. You can read about them if you like. Click the Details tab on the Geospace Magnetosphere Movies page, and you can download the software and analyze it yourself if you like. Plug it into your favorite graphing program or spreadsheet or whatever. So here's the ground magnetic perturbations map, and you'll see that kicking up. So aurora, possibly likely down to mid-latitudes tonight. Fingers crossed for that. Let's take a brief look at the geoelectric field. Since one of the ways you can gauge a CME impact is through actually looking at the power grid. So that's an interesting one, sort of an infrastructure-based way to see what's going on as far as grid induction. Keep in mind, induction also does happen in things like railways and pipelines and so forth. That's the actual empirical data from the power grid itself. Induced power over Canada and the U.S. And we're coming at you a little earlier tonight since it is the Sunday edition of the Daily Space Weather Show. KP index is at 1.66, but not for long. We're going to see it go right into at least geomagnetic unrest here at the next update. So it could be happening soon. We'll show you why here in a minute. The reason is right there. Look at that magnetic field suddenly getting stronger and going strong negative BZ. So currently 12 nanotesla at a BZ of negative 12. So a fully southward pointing magnetic field there. The BZ highly negative there. That's the vertical component of the magnetic field, and a negative BZ is what you want to see if you want to see space weather. So space weather here arriving. The rest of those parameters, if they stay where they are, will be in geomagnetic unrest, possibly even a low-level geomagnetic storm at those conditions. So that's the data from ACE, which since yesterday has been looking much better, by the way, much more believable. And here's the Discover, which very much agrees. So that's the other spacecraft orbiting Lagrangian point 1, about 1 million miles from Earth. There the field is slightly less negative at 12 nanotesla, but a BZ of negative 10. Solar wind density here, 11.5 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind velocity, about 350 kilometers per second. So it's a slow impact. And I suspect this is actually a pre-CME impact. I think this is a CME that occurred before the stronger one, because those speeds are way too slow for the one that erupted on the 3rd. So I suspect we're going to see a second significant impact here. Just watch the data, watch it play out. Don't be surprised to see a KP8 within the next 24 hours. KP8G4 geomagnetic storm. Not likely to be long-lived, but there could be a big spike in that solar wind. So here are GOES magnetometers, and you can see them getting pretty jagged there for the past few hours. Not a big surprise there, as space weather is showing up. Magnetic sector of the heliosphere is North Pole oriented. Nothing new happening there. There's the last image. North Pole magnetic sector will remain for days. Here's our solar magnetic fields, the line of sight field plot. Photosphere magnetism in gray, B field in blue, polar fields in red and green for south and north respectively. Coronal holes. Line of sight plot is next. And we've got North Pole coronal holes here winning out. So, looks like we'll see some trans-equatorial ones there showing up. Some more coronal holes here rotating in an interesting fashion, interesting enough, to be likely to produce some possible space weather, which we will cover here at the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. Again, pardon the rotating field of view effect there. I forgot to turn that off after doing close-ups. So yeah, most of the imagery is going to have that rolling effect. That's the rotate field of view feature on helioviewer.org. So yeah, coronal holes, and these are all North Pole oriented, or all the ones east of center longitude. Right, so these are north. These are north. These are north. North Pole magnetic sector to continue, barring some sudden change. And sudden changes can indeed and do regularly happen. That's a little harder to predict than the stuff that we do successfully predict every day on the channel. Continuing right along to sunspots. And you can see the sunspot number here has leveled off, but it's only going to be brief because we do see more new sunspots in the east. So yeah, those will be counted by tomorrow, and you'll see another modest uptick in sunspot number most likely, as we will have more new and rising regions than setting or decomposing regions. So there's our flare probability monitor and scoreboard. And yeah, like I said yesterday, the fuse is lit for X-class solar flares, and we've seen 2 since yesterday. Look at that, a 60% chance of X-class solar flares, according to our flare probability monitor there, the automated one. So yeah, and don't worry, we'll show you some very close close-ups here in a moment. Both animated ones and still high-res imagery coming up. So before we get to energetic particles and so on, let's move to sunspots from SDO's HMI instrument. There we go, we're good. So there is our magnetometer. Let's move in a little bit closer here to HMI continuum. And yeah, we got new sunspots there forming in the east. So no new rising sunspots, it looks like, but some new forming sunspots and really no degrading sunspots. So sunspot number 2 tick up once again. Now that area down there, that larger sunspot, that's 3664, right below the Earth scale. And that one does have some capability to produce large flares. It is looking increasingly unstable for the past few hours, as I look at it right now through the GOES 16 SUVI. Which is, by the way, streaming live to twitch.tv/smashomash. There are its fields. And let's see, it is gaining a little magnetic complexity there. So that's becoming a little bit more of a flare player than it was yesterday and throughout the day today. But here's the real sunspot to watch, sunspot 3663. It'll continue to be the star within a star. That is good stuff. Its capability to produce X-class flares is only going up, assuming it doesn't degrade as it approaches that northwestern limb. Yeah, good times for space weather enthusiasts. Look at that straight line of magnetic shear there. That is a massive magnetic shear line. I mean, look at that. That is pretty legit. I mean, if you go back here and look at the umbrae associated with that, that is classic beta gamma delta class sunspot. Good times indeed. Good times indeed. And before we get to that stuff, energetic particles and solar flares. Now, the likelihood of a proton event is going up as well. That's got to do with the proximity of the flare to the western limb. And check it out, the background X-ray flux is moving toward M class. I mean, the background flux for the past 24 hours, counting all these flares, is like somewhere like a C7 or something like that. So we're seeing some quite high X-ray flux here without even a much higher sunspot number. So for everybody who's claiming it's a grand solar minimum because the sun's not producing enough flares, you're not looking at enough data, because the amount of flares is just proportionally consistent with the number of sunspots and an average to slightly above average solar sunspot cycle. If that gets you angry, make sure you leave a comment and let us know how mad you are about these obvious and basic facts. So let's move to our 94 angstroms. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So 2 X-class flares in there, 2 X-class events. And don't worry, we've got a lot closer views than that. Of course, we want to show 3664 as well, because it ain't bad. But we'll spend a lot more time on 3663. I would note that you can see those flares coming from almost exactly where we showed those magnetic shear lines. So that is of zero surprise to our regular viewers, I'm sure. And thanks to everybody who's been tuning into the channel for years. The channel has had the title of the world's most comprehensive daily space weather for a long, long time, half a decade. All right, so solar system forecast is next. People want to know where stuff is. There is additional plasma on the way to Earth, I assure you. This is where things are on Cinco de Mayo. And that's where things are on the 12th. A crescent waxing moon we'll have. And of course, we do have a line here connecting Uranus to Jupiter, to the Sun, to the Earth. And if your head's in Uranus, you may think that that is somehow relevant to anything, to your reality. Next, a star chart of what's overhead as that crescent moon sets. We're approaching new moon for the month of May. If you're up in the early morning, you may see Mercury and Venus rising ahead of the sun. Check it out. Here's what it'll look like. Of course, you have Saturn and Mars first, and then Mercury, and a sliver of a moon, and then Venus, and then the yellow dwarf shows up. Our astronomy photo of the day isn't a photo at all. It is an artist's rendition of a tidal disruption event. Yeah, tidal disruption event. This is when a star gets very close to a massive radio source, which some astronomers refer to as a, quote, black hole, end quote. And that massive radio source disrupts that star's orbit significantly, tearing off layers of its outer shells, like its stellar corona. And that causes weird hot spots to form around the massive radio source, sometimes referred to as a black hole, and so forth. But it doesn't look as pretty, and oftentimes we have an artist's rendition here instead of the actual radio telescope imagery. So of course I would prefer the latter, but sometimes it doesn't look so great. But let's see, what does it show here? It's showing an infrared image of a kitty cat. So anyway, apod.nasa.gov if you want to check it out. As far as coronagraph imagery, we've got a lot of missing data here, a lot of missing data. And if that spooks you, then it's definitely bunker time, all right? Because there's a ton of missing data about coronagraphs. We don't have any from, I think, yesterday or today. So, and check it out. Here's the spookiest thing of all, folks. If you want to be spooked about something, look at that. Look at that, folks. Dear God. Dear God. Look at this. Are you spooked yet? Oh, noes. The LASCO C3 has time traveled. It is now June 1st, 2026 at the LASCO C3 at 1:18 Universal Time. So, whoops. It's interesting to see what's going on. But I guess we only have one frame from June 1st, 2026. Yep, there it is, folks. The LASCO C3 has time traveled. Exciting stuff here to report from the Smash News Network, least busted name in news. Now, we do have some data from Stereo A. It's going to show you that there are no new CMEs on the way. So, terribly sorry if you wanted to be spooked about that, but here are the images from today. So there was a CME this morning associated with one of those X-class flares. But it went off to the north-northeast. So there you can see it on the difference imagery and the raw coronagraph. We have no custom coronagraphs today because there's no data. However, we will show filaments. So let's take a look at that, because that is there's one very berserk filament. Actually, there are a couple of berserk filaments, but especially this one that's about to become a prominent. So if you look a little bit closer, and then a little bit closer, that's the Charles Barkley filament, which is about to become a prominence, as it will be hanging off of the edge, assuming it doesn't eject or collapse or position itself in the meantime. So sometimes they do reposition, eject, or collapse, obviously, but that one is, by tomorrow's Daily Space Weather video, if it stays there, that will be a prominence, which is just a filament that is hanging off the edge of the solar disk from Earth's perspective. There's a little closer view to show you just how massive that really dense plasma area is. That is a very alien landscape right there. If you think the sun's weather is like the Earth's weather, you don't understand heliophysics or meteorology, because sunspots are nothing like hurricanes, and solar filaments are nothing like clouds, and the corona is nothing like the Earth's atmosphere, and coronal holes are nothing like anticyclones. I mean, these things are vastly different, and I'll just leave it at that, because frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. So here's Cerro Tololo, Chile's ground-based solar observatory, and you can see there are quite a few large filaments, but none in comparison to that Charles Barkley filament down there in the southwest. So that one's pretty sweet. We do have some massive ones rising in the northeast as well. We won't worry about those too much or naming them until they get a little bit closer to planet Earth. We do have a massive CME happening on the far side of the sun right now. That's from sunspot 3654. Yeah, 3654. Wait, 365. I think 3654, I think? I think that's the one that recently set from the southwest. You know, it's a pretty bulky sunspot, and it's been doing some actions there on the far side. Looks like it's produced some major flares and certainly some major CMEs. So I suspect that's coming from way down in the southern hemisphere there. And of course, it's giving you a great indication of the way CMEs are able to propagate out of the sun's atmosphere, known as the corona. We'll zoom out to show time and date stamps, just to make it as legit as it could possibly be. Yeah, major awesome CME happening there. And we hope that the LASCO C3 comes back from the future sometime soon to provide us more coronagraph imagery. Bonus features are next. Charging hazards are non-existent. The GOES electron flux here coming up off the floor, as you would expect, but it's going to go back down to crater it again, most likely. Again, CME impacts happening right now, the first of probably two. Again, because the one that's currently impacting is far too slow to have occurred on the 3rd. So, because of the plasma speed. So there is the 1-year relative physical electron chart. Here is the forecast model by NOAA. NOAA's electron forecast model there, fairly accurate. Here's the layer where it's measured. It's measured at the F flare from way up above. The GOES 16 and GOES 18 are at 23,500 miles of altitude, way up in the outer portion of the outer Van Allen belt. They use radiography pointing down. They're Earth-facing. They're pointing down at the Earth. They're using radiography to measure the free electrons up here at 300 kilometers of altitude. So that's what's being measured in the GOES electron flux. And here is that layer from the Australian Government Bureau of Meteorology, the ionosonde, depicting the vibrational frequency of the F layer. The layer 1 above the E layer and 2 above the D layer. That is the bridge between Earth and space. Really, the D layer is where space starts. At least the ionosphere, where most of the particles in the atmosphere are ions. So that's what's going on, and you can expect to see a lot of red on this on tomorrow's Daily Space Weather video, and a lot on today's as well, because it's still subsiding from the last geomagnetic storm. And just then, another one arrives. So again, we could see as much as a KP8, which would be very red on this. Keep in mind, during geomagnetic storm conditions, many of the measurements that we make become a little bit anomalous. Did you know that our global ionosphere nowcast also shows the neutral atmosphere nowcast and forecast? We don't usually show that because people will get confused. We don't usually talk about the neutral atmosphere too much except for in terms of meteorology, because that's sort of somewhere in between space weather and meteorology. So we only show the total electron content and the maximum usable radio frequency. I think that's a little bit more appropriate for people on YouTube. Keep in mind that imagery on the left, this one here, this will help you with your GPS errors. And on the other side over there, those will help radio operators. Perhaps if you don't know what part of the atmosphere you can refract an HF radio signal from. So that's why we show them. It does have value. I mean, I use a GPS on the regs, and I prefer not to go off course and have to chase people down. Sometimes I do, but I usually like to do that on purpose, not because I made a wrong turn. So anyway, yeah, magnetic shear up here. It's degraded since we last looked. It's still beta gamma delta class, 100%. And the fuse is still lit on the possibility of producing some lit space weather. We hope space weather gets lit, folks. And by the way, we hope you're lit enough to press the like button. Or if you're new to the channel, press subscribe. Get the world's most comprehensive daily space weather content delivered directly to your YouTube subscription feed. Who doesn't want that? Also, visit the links below the video if you prefer to see these videos continue to exist, as they are far from free. They're extremely costly to make, and we would prefer to keep making them. And Smash staff would prefer to keep my fist out of her face. Of course, I would prefer to keep her foot out of my you-know-what as well. So, but maybe more on that later, as I put the moron in more on that later. SNN, the world's least busted news source. Smash News Network, the least busted name in news. Now we're showing a pimple on planet Earth. The best place to get a sunburn is in the tropical Pacific. The Tropic of Cancer. The best place to get a sunburn, that's literally the UV dose. And if you're wondering what those lines are, those are clouds. Because clouds block sunlight in the daytime. That's how that works. I know it's complex. So, here come meteorology type things. Surface winds of the east, jet streams are next. If you had to look at only one global weather forecasting feature, the jet stream might be what you'd pick. Like if you're a pilot, you want to think about global weather patterns. Maybe you're a trans-world surfer and you want to know where the cold and hot's going to be and things like this. Jet stream. The 250 millibar winds. Surface winds of the central world. Shout out to the riders of the Giro d'Italia as Tadej Pogacar decisively takes the Maglia Rosa, the leader's jersey, on a mountaintop finish. What a surprise. It wasn't a surprise to me, as I called it, that he would win the stage, take the jersey, and whatever the other thing was. Called it. That's called understanding the variables, putting them together, and making an educated guess. Surface winds of the western world are looking like that. And there are the jet streams. Yeah, I'm talking about the Giro d'Italia, the world's second largest bike race, and to many, the world's best bike race. Partially because of the tifosi, which are the Italian fans. Anyway, here's satellite imagery for the Americas. Enough Euro trash talk. And yes, I am very Eurocentric, as I have been deeply engrossed in the sport of cycling since 1997. Turbulent weather in Texas. Look at what's going on in Texas. Man, oh man, it's enough to make you go into a storm cellar and drink a soda pop on Sunday. Who doesn't want to drink a soda pop in a cellar in Texas on a Sunday? I certainly do. It depends on what kind of soda pop, though. I guess RC Cola. Anyway, here are... what is that? That's rain accumulation for the next 3 days Euro model. There's the GFS model. Wait, I don't want to show that. I want to show snow accumulation because there's new snow coming, folks. 3 days of new snow there, Euro model. We'll show the GFS model for pressure and precipitation as well. Here's our weather.gov map, weather.gov. To know whether or not you should be hiding in a bunker, preparing your kayak, making sure your ball cock is in your boat, etc. Weather.gov. Because I think there might be too many counties there for us to provide a forecast for in this video. But here's a GFS 72-hour forecast for pressure and precipitation. And here's a temperature anomaly forecast for the next 72 hours. Same model, GFS. Keep in mind it's in degrees Celsius, as about half the country is anomalously cool and the other half is anomalously warm for the coming 3 days. We'll take some warmer temperatures as it is cold and rainy and disgusting outside right now. I think I may have grown rust by going on a stroll. My blood began to rust as my soul began to boil, as your soul will be in a hole with a coating of tin foil, unless you press like. So, I hereby bequeath your soul to remain out of a hole, but only if you press like. Otherwise, it's an ever-deepening and darkening abyss of doom, destruction, and doo-doo YouTube content about space weather. A bunch of lightning in the U.S., and overall, worldwide, there are a lot of strikes going on. We normally have about 150 to 200 strikes per minute, but now we've got up to 600 strikes per minute there. 597 right there on your screen. Real-time lightning map there from LightningMerps.org. LightningMerps.org. We're going to clear out the video with US Doppler radar. US Doppler radar. It shows vertical motion in the air column. There it is for the full 50 starts. There it is for the layer 48. There's your satellite map. And there must be something going wrong with the interdimensional barrier that allows us to make this video in your per-material plane of existence. Anyway, we hope that your soul can get out of Stygia if your soul has found itself stuck in Stygia. But otherwise, good luck with the River Styx. It might distort your audio. So anyway, this is me signing off. That's the water vapor map, by the way. And we'll see you next time. In the meantime, that surly wind be at your back.